Hey there, Dr. V here, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to have you here. I am your brilliant solutionist where I help you expand your life, expand your business, and explore untapped potential in multiple areas of your life. I'm in a different setting right now because I just got a brand new puppy. He's down there asleep, and I didn't want to take the chance in my office in case he runs out and has to use the restroom, and I don't have a crate for him right now. So I'm in a different place because puppy is asleep, and I want to do this impromptu video. So I was on higher ed, inside highered.com, and I saw this story, and it was a heartbreaking story, and I related to this. And maybe not related to at this level because it is a tragic story, but it sparked a story time that I want to share. So I won't be with you long. And so what happened at a university in New Jersey, not New Jersey, that's a different story I'm about to do. It was a University of Arizona State University, and a professor was killed by a former student. The professor's name was Thomas Meixner, Meixner. Don't know how to pronounce that name. So a former student, he was in a hydrology, some science department, and the student was already banned from the university for harassment on multiple occasions. And he didn't like something that the professor did, and he shot the professor. And the professor was only 46 years old. And in the world of higher ed, depending on when he started his career, that could have either been a very long career if he went like straight through from his bachelor's to his PhD, and then postdoc, and then became a professor. So he could have been a professor around the age of like maybe 26, and then he's had a long career then, or he could have been an actual scientist working in the private sector or doing whatever, and then came on board as a university professor. So two different ways to look at that, but either way, it's not that he's 46 is not an old age to be a college professor at the level where he was. But it reminded me of a story time, and I used to be a college professor. If you did not know, I was a college professor for 5 years. I spent most of my time in higher education. When I look back over my career, because I've been in college for multiple years. I got my PhD, had to go full-time as a student, so that was some years on. And then all of my other graduate studies, in higher ed. So I spent a lot of time at the university and understanding, how a lot of the ins and outs, right? Hopefully you can hear me. And so when I saw this story, I was like, oh my gosh. And it brought to me, like I said before, a story time. And I won't get into too much detail because I'm not saying this in comparison, because obviously it wasn't life-threatening, but I just wanted to shed some light on how universities are, and this is going to be a general statement, and if you disagree, that's fine. You can put the comments down below, but a lot of universities protect students more than they protect faculty members. In university, the campus at a lot of universities is wide open. So yes, you can say anything can happen to anybody. But when I say that the students are more protected, I don't mean like physically, because the campus is wide open, so anybody can get it. But as far as like the rules and procedures and policies to protect people, the students have more of those things in place than faculty members. So there was a time, and again, I'm not saying like I was threatened to this level, so that's not the case, but I just want to give you this story to show you. So one time, I can't remember like what year I was teaching. It's probably my second to the last year there, so maybe year 4. There was an incident where a student got involved in the Title IX case. And one day I'm going to share that story because that was the defining moment that I knew my time in higher ed was up. But the student had a Title IX issue, and I took up for the student. The student was a Black male, and how the situation went down was not fair to him. And there was an allegation that was so horrific that it would have tarnished his career before it even started with the type of allegation. And he was going into the education field. So, and that's another video for another day, but although, people say teachers are low paid and it's a lot, that's not fair for teachers, the process of becoming a teacher with all of the exams and the level of rigor that's supposed to be in the programs, that's a lot. So to go through all of that for a job that doesn't even pay, the equivalent to the training that you take to become a teacher, it was like, okay, I don't want to say it's bad enough, but he was a very, very bright student who could have gone into any field, but he wanted to use that knowledge to teach children. So when you have a Black male who wants to do that, and it's like, whoa, what we're not going to do here is stop him before he even gets started. So before I took up for him, I went through all the things like, hey, dude, you better tell me the truth because I'm about to stick my neck out for you or whatever. Did my own investigation and found out the truth. And turns out the girl lied. White female who lied. But again, that's really not what this video is about. So as I'm going through trying to take up for him, there's an older white man who had befriended him, over the course of the few years they had taken classes together. And this older guy, I guess he was coming back to school because he wanted to be in education, but he was a very eccentric older man. And it was like, I don't think you should be in the classroom. And I know it sounds like discrimination, but there are a lot of things that to take place, you got to think about when you want to put people in the classrooms. And again, that's another story for another day. It's like you need to really do some evaluations before you stick people into classrooms. But the man, I never had an actual class with this guy. Somehow he missed my sequence of classes, but all of the other professors in my department had classes with him, and they were just like weirded out by him. And he would carry a buck knife. I want to say it had to be like a 12-inch buck knife he would carry on his hip, like you could physically see it every time he went out. And I think he got into like some issues because he had to do observations at the school, but didn't really want to leave his knife. It was just a lot. But anyway, but he could walk freely with this buck knife while he was on the university campus. So one day, when all the Title IX stuff was going down, and I guess the student had shared with him how I had been taken up for him. So the guy came into my office, like nobody was on campus. This had to be like a Friday, which I was rarely on campus on Fridays, but I forgot why I was there. And he was like, Dr. Glenn White, can I talk to you? Now, this man, I'm only 5'1.25". Give me my quarter. And he had to be like maybe 6 foot or a little above, maybe like 6'1", 6'2". He wasn't a big guy, but he was still tall. And he reminded me maybe like a Crocodile Dundee cross Rambo, but not like bulky, but just trying to describe him. So it wasn't like I was afraid of him, but he had a presence, and he also had this buck knife. So he asked me, can we talk in my office? And usually I try not to close the door when I'm talking with students, the whole thing, like don't be alone with students, male, female, other, whatever. You just don't be alone with students. But he came in, and so the way that the offices are not that big. So if you can imagine a college office, and then I have my bookcase, there's some filing cabinets. I have the big desk, and I think I had another bookcase against the wall. So it was kind of tight, it was enough room to stand here, then come around, then my desk, and then there was a wall. So he comes in and he was like, can I talk to you? And I'm like, for what? What do you want to talk to me about? And then he talks to me about what happens with the student and how he's a good guy. Don't let, the things happen to him. But the reason why I'm bringing up that story as it relates to the tragic incident that happened with the professor at Arizona State is the other faculty would share their concerns about this particular student carrying the buck knife on campus. And pretty much they were like, it's nothing that they can do. He has a right to do that. It's not a firearm, this, that, and the other. Now, had it been switched and a professor was carrying it, then it's like you're endangering the professors, right? And what a lot of people don't think about, and the same thing happened when I was in the case, not the bug knife, but I want you to think about this visual. As professors, as classroom teachers, we're in rooms. It's only one of us, and the students can range from 10 to 100 sometimes, depending on what type of class that you're teaching at the university level. And yes, we are the authority, but you never know what can happen in the classroom. You never know what can happen in the office hours. So we're really putting our lives in danger for a lot, and I don't think people realize that. So whatever happened with this professor and this student, I'm pretty sure that he had to say something, because you don't just go up. Well, I don't want to say that because I'm not in the mind of that person, but I'm gonna step out and say it wasn't just like, oh, I had this thought, I don't like this professor, let me go shoot him. There had to be an exchange of something. There had to be something that was happening. And from what I read, it was like, I think it was a grade issue or something that the professor didn't like. And we deal with that a lot. So can you imagine a guy with a buck knife, if I said something that he disagreed with, like, no, I am not going to take up for the student with the Title IX, I don't care what you say. Something could have triggered him, and I could have been gone or severely injured, because they said he was allowed to carry the buck knife. We don't have security at our office, and yeah, I could call, but by the time he would have come across the desk, it would have been too late. So it just made me think about like the safety of our professors and our classroom teachers, but more so our professors at universities, because I get the feeling that professors really aren't as protected, and I don't think people see professors as like public figures. And one thing the article said from Inside Higher Ed is that professors are like quasi-public figures, and that is true. You can go to any university website, you can see the professor's first name, last name, you can see their office phone, you can see their emails, you can see their location on campus if you want to go find them. And it is not that hard, especially if a building, think about a university in your area, you can pretty much just walk on campus, blend in, ask somebody, hey, where's the such and such building? And then all our names are on the doors. So it's really easy to find us, but you can't share any information about a student. You have to be very careful you can't put grades out. Grades have to be by their student number or the last part of their social. I don't even think we can use the last part of their social, but it has to be like maybe the last digits of the student number, so it's measures like that. Everything is top secret. Don't share anything. If there's something personal going on, you can't tell this, that, and the other. And it's just very interesting that the students are protected at that level, but professors aren't. Another thing I want to touch on is, I didn't think I was going to touch on this video, but I guess I am looking down at my notes, is that, and it's kind of one of those things, like, I don't know how it would work, but I know that it's needed. There needs to be some sort of student evaluations that are happening at the universities when they admit students. And people can say that's a violation of privacy. And I'm not saying they should hold anything against a student. It's like, if you made it there, you can figure out how to pay to get there, whether that's through family, financial aid, whatever the case may be, and you earn the right to be there, cool. But I think it's important, and this is just Dr. V, and just from my experience, that I need to know who I'm dealing with. Now, coming from K-12, we had files on students, and we knew what we were going into the classroom to deal with. And again, you're in there with 15, 20, sometimes 30 students. I taught middle school and high school. When I interned at a high school, and I wasn't even 21 years old. So I'm in these classrooms with, some of them were like adults, right? And even when I taught sixth grade, I remember I had a student, he was 6'2" in the sixth grade. And I was like, oh no, we have to get this boy out of here, because I think he was like 16 at the time. He had held 15, stayed back. He did have some mental issues, but I was like, academically, he's not at the level, but maturity wise, he's still a 15-year-old boy in the classroom with 11-year-olds. 10 and 11-year-olds, he has to go. And I didn't feel comfortable. And at this time, I'm like in my early 20s. So, but because I had a foul on the student, I was like, okay, I just knew this was not it. I'm not going to be able to handle this right here. We need to put some things in place. But I'm not saying use the foul to treat the students any differently. Now, again, this is why it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because not all teachers or professors will do it this way. They will use it against the student, but the ones who would do it right is for informational purposes, so I'll know what I'm dealing with. It's a little different when you go to higher ed, because a lot of files are protected. The student services, they can put things on file, and they have advocates to speak up for them, and they can share information, but certain information they won't share. They'll share if it benefits them academically. It's like, well, the student, has some issues, they need notes, or they need you to do this, that, and the other. And it's like, regardless of, so they can use this information to get, more accommodations. It would be helpful if I knew this when I'm giving out assignments, if I'm doing group projects, or if I'm asking them to work on their own. And all of this does go back to what happened at Arizona State, because I don't know, again, this was just one article that I read. I didn't go into a lot of detail, but they were saying this student had a lot of issues prior to, what's the student for? Let me take maybe I got the professor age wrong. The student was older as well. He wasn't a traditional student. I think he was in his 40s as well. But again, details, my apologies. But you can look it up, Arizona State professor, and I told you the professor's name. But the point is, he already had some issues from other universities and from different areas where he was that followed him. And for some reason, either the science department at Arizona State didn't know, or the university didn't know. But it's interesting how after this incident, after this professor had to lose his life because of some foolishness, now all of this stuff came out. So it would be helpful if, again, that's why it's like, I don't have a tight solution, but I do think people who are involved with certain students, we need a file. Some things that higher ed can learn from K-12 and vice versa. I would have appreciated a file on certain students so I can know what is going on in their minds. I know something was in a file for the student who lied about the Title IX incident. I know something had to be in her file about something, because here's the thing, this wasn't her first time doing something like that. She was successful the first time. And I was like, well, could somebody have put a little note or something, an asterisk, before we've gotten to this point? But the thing with my training from K-12 allowed me to watch for certain things to know that she was going to be trouble. Now, I tried not to hold it against her, but early on I failed because I didn't have some strategies in place. I learned a lot more, but I still taught her. But it was still kind of like, there's some things I know that's not right. And had I known, things would have been a lot different. And I want to put that out there, and especially the students who are coming through the education system, that if we still have a teaching profession, or pretty much any profession where you have to really deal with people, if you're coming through a university, I do think some sort of evaluation is needed. And then when they go to jobs, some sort of evaluation is needed. And again, it's kind of challenging to say that, because then if something comes up, if someone shows that they're mentally, I don't want to say unstable, but maybe there's something that they can cope with, it's like, well, if you didn't test me, you would have never known, and I didn't exhibit signs. So it's kind of like catch-22. That's the word I was looking for. It's kind of a catch-22. But for something like this, I do think some sort of evaluation needs to take place, or some discussions, or some documents, some files need to be shared, because the student really should have never been on campus. The student somehow was able to still walk up through campus, even though he was banned from campus. And then this professor had to lose his life over that. This is my third point, that what led up to this, and then I've experienced this as well, where students feel entitled about certain things. They feel entitled with certain grades. They feel entitled about just everything. And I don't even want to say it's this generation. I think it's just this era of people going to college or something. Like I don't know, because this guy was older, so that's why I'm careful not to say this generation of college students. But it's a lot of entitlement that goes on, and this is a stretch, but again, from my experiences, students aren't successful after they graduate in their careers because they weren't challenged at the collegiate level. They really weren't challenged at the level of rigor that needed to take place in universities, because universities at the end of the day are a business. And who's the customer? The students are the customer. So students have rights that a lot of professors don't have. It's like, I remember, it's like, do I want to deal with this headache or just go on about my business, right? And then some days I would fight some certain issues, like, no, this student doesn't deserve this grade. And other days I'm like, you know what, I don't really care like that, because my mental health is more important than staying up all night and fighting this exhausting battle that I'm not going to win. And the professors would take the student's place. I'll give you an example. I had a student one time who missed 13 assignments. 13 assignments. It is a 16-week semester. And I wasn't going to fail the student. Why? Because that's additional paperwork you don't want to deal with. And I know it sounds horrible, but until you've been in our shoes, don't judge us. So I was like, you're going to get a C. I think it was a C or a C minus, to where it was going to hurt, but not stop you, right? Because I was like, look, whatever at that point. And did you know that there are colleagues in my department was like, oh, just let them make it up? And I was like, well, I have a syllabus. The rules are no makeup work, or this is the allotted time that you can do makeup work, in this window, because that comes back on me. I have to grade. I have to do things. And it snowballs. And they're like, well, just let's do this, or can you do an alternative assignment? It was so much. And I was like, really? Because if they were in another department, this would not happen, because I was in dual departments. I taught in the mathematics department. I taught in the education department. Totally different in math world. It is what it is over there. In the education department, not so much. And this happens in other universities as well. I have friends who are still teaching the university area who they may be like education professors, but if they're in a hard science department, they get to follow the rules of a hard science, right? And that's a beautiful thing. We love that. But then for some reason, when we go into the cognitive education, it's very, anyway, is a lot of them are not as rigorous, right? As far as the rules. So when you have students that are entitled, and when grades are like everything to them, not knowledge, not learning, not saying that they understand what's happening, but just the actual grade, all kind of things can trigger. I've gotten horrible comments and evaluations written because of that. There have been other incidents. This professor, he's not the first one that's been killed. I think it was another incident in 2016 that happened. And these are the ones that were just in the news. We don't know anything else that is taking place. Another thing, they were talking about the harassment. A lot of teachers have, like, out of 554, one of the studies showed 554 professors they surveyed, 91% of them have had harassment issues, whether that was through email, whether that was verbal. And I think a very small percentage, maybe like 9%, involves sexual assault. Now, that doesn't mean like the R word or anything. It could be a grabbing, however they label sexual assault. But still, so because a student didn't get their way. So I just wanted to share with that. Again, I don't have all the solutions, but my heart goes out to the family of Dr. Thomas Meixner, Miexner, because that was an unfortunate way to lose his life doing something that he loved. He's at work, and this is what happened. So my heart, even though I'm not in higher ed anymore, I'm not a college professor anymore, but I still am in the space of training and development and teaching. I still go to places to speak at conferences, or I'm planning to host my own live events. And having my own workshops. And it's just something to think about, what is happening. Now on this side, I get to screen who comes into my classroom, but at the university level, unfortunately, you don't always get to do that. So those are just some things I want to highlight. Like the first example I gave with the student with the buck knife, that the university at that time didn't see anything wrong with it. Good thing that I didn't have a bad relationship with this particular student, because things could have went totally wrong. But there was no security, there was no one there. It was just me and that student. And by the time I realized that the door was closed, he was already in. And again, he didn't do anything to threaten me. I just wanted to give that example of like how quickly something can happen. The second thing, what did I talk about? The second one was the need for student evaluation, or mental evaluations, or some kind of record or track record to kind of see what we're dealing with. The admissions department, they don't have to teach these classrooms a lot of times, so they really don't know what happens on a day-to-day basis when, after they slide students on in. And then the third thing is like, got to rethink how we are, how university professors are treating students, and if they're able to. Now, some departments are like, if I said you got an F, you got an F, take it over. I have professors like, it is what it is. But a lot of cases, because of the stress of tenure and wanting to keep your job and wanting to do well, the students, they have a lot more rights than you do. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you got any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop them down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to read the full story, you can go to Inside Higher Ed. You can read a few for free, but you can sign up for free if you want to get more articles. But yeah, just type in Professor Killed by Former Student at Arizona State. And again, my heart goes out, and just blessings and covering and prayers for his family and everyone who is still teaching in the system. And that's all I have. So thanks so much for listening with me. Bye.